Hello, in this video I'm going to show you guys how to set up a development environment for interacting with the TWS API, which is a trading software by Interactive Brokers. I have many trading tutorials about this software right here on this YouTube channel, so check them out. This is going to be a very special video, guys, because I'm going to show you step by step, basically from scratch, how to set up a development environment on a system that has no development environment set up. We're going to show you how to set up a compiler in C++ and how to build one of the examples. Okay, so we're going to be using only native C++ here. If you guys enjoy this content, if you find that it helps you, you can always return the favor by supporting the channel just by clicking like and subscribe and clicking on the first link in the description, which is interactivebrokers.com, and you just click on that and it's going to support this video immediately. You don't have to do anything else. All right, let's get on with it. Hope you enjoyed the video. So the first thing is, why C++? That is because it is the industry standard in any industry that requires speed and hardware efficiency. It's a low-level programming language. It's just faster than Python. It's just fast, okay? So I started learning C++ with the ACSIL programming interface, which is inside of a trading software called Sierra Chart. And that's a software I use for trading outside of TWS. I use it for trading futures and other stuff. So what we're gonna do here today is set up an environment for interacting with the TWS API using a few different dependencies. The library we're going to be using for C++ TWS API is called that. It's called TwsCppApi by a user named JanBoonen. I hope I'm saying it properly. And I'm going to show you guys how to get that library, how to build the library on your system into a DLL, and then how to build one of the example programs. And then maybe in a future video, I'll show you guys how to access some of the EReader and EClient methods and all that. Or maybe we'll do it in this video, who knows? So let's get to it. The first thing we need on our system is a compiler. I'm on my Windows 7 system right here, and there is basically nothing installed. I've installed Trader Workstation because we are going to need this in order to run our program. So because our program is going to be calling methods that interact with the TWS API. So you need Trader Workstation or IB Gateway. That's the other one, which is a more lightweight version. So the first thing I need to do on my system is I need to install a C++ compiler. I don't even have a compiler installed right now. The compiler I use on my main system back at home is MinGW64. Now, some people use the Visual Studio compiler, but I'm just gonna keep it simple and say to you guys, like, I don't want to be using anything with the name Microsoft on it. Some of you guys are gonna find that funny, but the way they're going right now, I think most of you should be thinking about, potentially moving away from Microsoft. MinGW64 is a compiler that is used to compile Windows programs, but there's also different versions of it that operate on Linux and all that. So what I'm going to do is access the internet right now by using the Firefox browser. I'm going to open up the internet right now, and then I am going to type into Google MinGW64. And the first thing that comes up is this, which is the website mingw64.org, and it will give you some information about this. And it's basically a Windows compiler, and it's based on GCC and LLVM, which I don't know exactly what those are, but GCC is basically a C++ compiler, or C compiler. And we're going to scroll down until we get to the downloads. Actually, I'm going to click on downloads on the top left over there. And then I'm going to scroll down until I get to Windows. Let's see here. Maybe we can just get it right off of GitHub. I think that would be pretty much fine here. MinGW builds. So let's select that installation, GitHub. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this version right here, which is UCRT. So what I'm going to do is unpack this. I'm going to open it with WinRAR, MinGW64, and I'm going to extract this to my C drive, just like that. So now I am extracting this version of MinGW64 into my C drive on this system. Okay, so it is now done dumping to my C drive. And now I have a folder in my C drive named MinGW64. The next thing I want to do is I want to add this folder, specifically the bin folder, to the environment variable path of my system so that I can access it from the command prompt without having to put in the entire directory every time I want to compile a program. Why this is necessary, I just want to show you. So I'm going to open up a command prompt, okay, like this. And then here I'm going to type in G++ /version, and I should not get any response. As you can see, it said G++ is not recognized as an internal or external command or batch file. So now I'll do the same exact thing, but instead I'll be in the bin directory, and I will actually just copy the address of this and paste it into the command prompt. And then what I'll do is I will call g++-version, and now we have a response. So what we need to do is we need to add the min.gw folder to our environment variables on Windows. So I'm going to do this, and on Windows 7 it's different than on Windows 10. So I'm going to figure out how to do this on Windows 7, and I'll come back to you guys. What I'm going to do is go ahead into my user variables, and I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to name it path, and I'm going to put in the variable value like that, which is the directory of the min.gw folder. And now let's see if this works when I close the command prompt and open it again. So g++version, and we are in business, guys. So now we have access to our compiler here directly from the command prompt. So that's the first step. We now have a compiler installed on our system. The next thing is we need to install the additional dependencies required to get the TWS API running here in C++. So I'm going to show you guys the library that I use, and it's a pretty good library. So I'm going to type in TWS-CppApi, and we'll see what comes up here. I'm just searching on Google, and it's actually this one right here. TWS API C++ is a library built on top of the IBPOSIX C++ library and makes programming with the IBAPI easier and more robust. And I encourage you guys to read through the documentation here, because what they did was they fixed a lot of the issues and common pitfalls that you can run into coding directly into the API. So basically there was a lot of issues where your compiler would not pick up syntax errors, and I think it's just because of the way the IB code is designed. So this library sort of fixes that, and it really checks for the right syntax to make sure that you're putting in everything correctly, so you're not going to get any programs that build but then do not do anything. So here's the library. Definitely spend some time reading the README file. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get the entire library. I'm going to download a zip file from this repository on GitHub, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to extract these files to, again, my C drive on this system. So now that that's done, I can go ahead and see my C drive, where we have, not only do we have our compiler, but we also have this now, which is the TWS API C++ -master. So we officially have this library here on our system. And one thing you need to know about this library is that the version that's on GitHub right now, actually there was a recent pull request that is really important. So you actually have to go into some of the source code and adjust it before you build the library, or else you're going to run into issues where order placement doesn't work, and you're going to run into some exceptions and errors there. So what I will do is go over to pull requests here. And this is the post I'm referring to, remove deprecated API fields. So this is because IB updated TWS and they changed some of the API fields on the newer versions of TWS. So what you need to do is you need to go into this tab right here, which was files changed. And you're going to want to find this header file inside of the source code that we just downloaded, and you need to basically get rid of these fields: order.etrade only, firm quote only, and NBBO price cap, and basically just copy the pull request that this user submitted here, because that's going to be necessary if you plan to do any order placement through the API. So I'm inside the source folder in the TWS API C++ folder, and I'm going to get to the exact spot there, shared EClient socket base impl.h. That's the first header file that we need to change. So I'm going to open this in my text editor, which is Notepad++. Okay, and now I'm going to go over to the line that they specified that needs to be removed or changed, which is line 1810. What we need to actually do here is not remove the lines, but we need to actually just reset the fields that are inside of these parentheses right here. So if you built the library prior to changing those fields, you're going to have a library that is going to not work if you try to do any order submission. So before you build the library, which is a dependency to the exe you're going to build, you're going to have to make sure those fields are set. Okay, so in this case, you have to change those old deprecated API fields. So what we're going to do now is build the library, which is the dependency that needs to be used for the program we're going to make. And then we're going to compile a very simple program. What I'm going to do is go over to the TWS API C++ folder, and I'm going to go to the API folder right here. And these two here, these two header files, are basically what contains most of the EClient and EReader methods that you're going to be using when you interact with the TWS API. So this is kind of the stuff that you need to reference in order to know which methods are supported here. I forgot to say, you don't actually have to download the TWS API from their website if you use this library, because it already comes with a version of the API. It's not the most recent version, but it's a stable version. It works perfectly fine, even with newer versions of TWS. So what we're going to do now is actually show how to build the library on your system and then potentially build the program. So let's see what we can do here. I have a couple batch files here that are going to help us build stuff, and they're batch files that I built after many hours of trial and error. And also another thing here, you can see there's an actual application right here, which is a TWS program. And now in this folder, there's missing a DLL, and that is why this application will not run. If I try to run this application, it will give me this message. This program can't start because the DLL is missing from the computer. Try reinstalling the program. But in reality, it's because this program, which is just a simple program I made that talks to TWS API, it requires the library to be built next to it and be in the same folder that it's running from. There probably is a way to build the library directly into your exe, but again, we don't have to do that, and it's going to increase the file size quite a bit. So just as an example, I made a new batch file in the same folder because I don't want to run the other batch files. And you can see that if I run test.bat, it doesn't know where it is. So again, you're either going to have to add in another path variable, which is annoying, especially here on Windows 7. What I am going to do is I'm going to put these batch files, the TWS and TwsCppApi, I'm going to put them directly into the min.gw folder that we added as our path earlier. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to go to bin, and I'm just going to put them here. And I'll add the test batch file as well. I'll add this one as well. So now on the command prompt, when I type in test.bat, it worked. You saw that? It actually executed the first line of whatever was in that batch file. It doesn't matter where you put them, it's just that I don't want to have to type in the directory every single time. So I just put them in a directory that we have direct access to from the command prompt. Okay, so now what I am going to do is I am going to open up these batch files from that folder into Notepad++. And now I have them both here. And the first thing we need to do is build the library. So this is the batch file for building the library. My batch file, I guess we don't have to go over all of it, but basically what it does is it sets a couple of variables in the batch file, and really this is just for convenience. So when I'm building different programs and EXEs and stuff, I don't have to continually retype every single thing. So I created these variables to make things easier. So it goes and get the name of the source code file, and then I have to set a name for the executable or DLL that I'm going to export as well. And what this does here is it finds if the task is running and it kills it. But actually what this is really just for if you're running a program at the same time as trying to compile it. This basically kills the program, compiles it, and then at the end of this you'll have a run statement, which I think it is here, yeah. Because this one just builds the library, so it doesn't have the run statement at the end of it. Okay, so we need to build the library. That's the first thing we need to do right now. So this line is important right here where we're using cd, which changes the directory of where we are in the command prompt. In this case, you can see it's changing the directory to C TWS API CPP master, which is exactly where we need to go. And then the next line right here, this is the compiler line. This is where most people will get confused, is where you have to actually set and learn about the compiler parameters for min.gw64. So in this case, you can just copy my line if you want, and I'll just show you what it is. So we have this, which defines that it's a Win64 program. We're also defining this right here, which is something related to the library that I had to add in. And then these few parameters here are telling it that we're going to be compiling a static and shared library, which is basically a DLL. And again, I don't know all the technicalities behind it, but basically when you include these flags, you're basically telling it that you want to build a DLL. And then you have to include the source code file here. And because I included it on the first line, I set it as a variable. I don't have to type it in again here. But if you didn't, then you would have to type in the actual source code file, which is inside of this directory right here, because we've changed the directory. Okay. And then we have our include statements. And this is where it can get annoying if you didn't have someone showing you exactly what you needed to include. But doing this on Windows, I went through all the trouble for you guys. So we're including this right here, which is the API folder. We're also including the SRC folder. Then we're including C++ master source POSIX client shared folder. We are also including source POSIX client SRC folder. And then what we are doing is we are linking to this folder right here, the API folder, because that's where the library is. And then there's a couple extra fields here, which I'm not sure are necessary, but they're there and they work. So that's the way it is for now. It's outputting to this right here, which is going to be called TWS-CppApi_64.dll. And actually what I normally do here, instead of actually typing in the name, is I just put in the variable for the exe. But because we're compiling the library, I just typed it in here. On the next example, you'll see what I mean there. And then at the very end, okay, there's important link libraries you need to include here, like this one, -l winsock32, and then this one, winsock2_32, and then LP thread. All looks good right here. So I think that we can go ahead and build this. So I'm going to open up the command prompt, and then I'm going to type in TWS-CppApi.bat. Okay, and we get this message, which is task list is not recognized as an internal or external command operable program or batch file. And I think this might be because I'm on Windows 7, but I'm not 100% sure it's because of that. So I'm actually going to remove this anyways, because we're not running the program to start, but we're just building it. So I can actually just remove those lines. It's not important. So I'll save that and let's execute it one last time and see what happens. Okay, so we're now building. When you see it, when you see this here, it's currently building the library right now. All right, and we are getting some warning messages, but that doesn't mean the program is not going to compile. Basically, what it's telling you is that there's a couple of things that have been redefined. So now if we go into our folder for the TWS API, and we go into the API folder, because that's where we built it to, you can see we now have this DLL right here, and you can see that it's been built at this current time right now, which is 6:22 p.m. on February 1st. So we now have a DLL. The next thing we need to do is we need to build an application. I'm going to show you the source code that is important that you guys need to study here before we build the program and everything. I'm going to show you the two pieces of source code that are important that help me get started and that give you a good basis for how to get started. Just something that already works that you can kind of build on top of, all right? So hopefully this works for you guys. It helped me get started. The first thing is eventually you're going to have to make reference to these header files at some point. Because a lot of the EReader methods, they return references to some of these structures, like the order structures or the contract definitions. That's important as well. So just keep in mind, these are in the POSIX client shared folder, and that's where you're gonna have to reference those header files. So we're gonna go now into this folder, TWS API C++. Then we'll go to test, then select source. And over here, there's some examples. Now, the first example that you should test is this one right here named test. So I will open this in Notepad++. Now you can actually build this, and I'm going to show you guys how to build this in the next step here. And the second example that you want that I'm using as a sort of starting point is this one called retrieve history. And this one is not in the test examples. You actually have to get this one off of their documentation. So on the GitHub repository, you go to the wiki page right here, and then off to the right there's going to be sort of a list, and you find this one, retrieving history data, and just click on the basics example right here, and then take this entire source code, just copy it into your own text file, and it's basically going to look like this right here. Now, this was a good example. It helped me get started. Okay, so what we're going to do now is build the test program. So let's go on and do that. So we have this, which is called test.cpp. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over to my other batch file, which is this one, tws.bat. And here, this is where we can see the batch file is a little bit longer because we're setting variables for the source code name, the exe name. We're closing the program if it's running. And then we're changing the directory to where our source code is. And then we're building the program. After the program is built, we are changing the directory to the folder of where the program is, and then we are starting the program. This is really useful for when you're debugging your program, because all you do is you go into your command prompt and you just type in TWS, in this case, TWS.bat, but you don't actually have to type in .bat every time. And whether your program is running or not, it's going to compile it and run it, which is good. So this is my own batch file that I sort of made, but I think on other systems, like probably like Linux, I've watched coding tutorials where it looks like these guys type in like one thing and it just does everything. But you know, this is sort of what you need on Windows to make it be efficient like that. So I'm not going to build it just yet because I want to make sure that our source code is set to the right thing and we're set to the right program. So the first thing is, at the very top, we need to make sure that the source code is set to the right source code. So I'm going to actually set this to the name of our source code file, which is test.cpp. I don't have to type in .cpp because if you look in my compiler line where I'm putting in the source code, I've already put in the .cpp right there. Okay, but if you didn't have this batch file, if you didn't want to use this batch file, you could just type it all in right there. The test.cpp is basically what you would type in. The first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that when you're calling cd, you're changing the directory to the folder where your source code is located. And then after your program is finished compiling, you're changing the directory to where your program is located if you want to run it. And that's what I'm doing here, basically. As you can see, the last command here is I'm starting the program that I just compiled. Now we'll look at the compiler line really quickly. So this is just a flag that's telling it what type of processor or what type of operating system we're using, but there's additional flags. I don't have all of them in here. Now when I'm debugging stuff, I don't set this to O2, even though this library is very lightweight, so it compiles in a couple of seconds anyways. But if you really want it to compile in like a second or less, you can set this to OG. Basically, that's like the debugging optimization flag, where your code execution time is going to be a little bit slower, but it's going to compile a lot faster. So I'm actually going to leave it on O2 because I know that it's not going to take long anyways for this. But in the case where you're using like additional dependencies and like other libraries that have like multiple dependencies, building with OG is going to help you out. It's going to help you save a few seconds when you're debugging that. Okay, so we'll go along here. Now I had included boost because I was using that on my main system. Now I'm going to remove it for now because in the example we're building here, there's actually no calls to any boost function. C++ boost. Boost is an additional C++ library, and it just adds some good features that I use one of them called boost format. I'll show you how to use that maybe in this video or in another. Okay, so I've removed that include. All we're including is the API folder right here because we're including the library that's in there. And we're also including the SRC folder, which has source code in there. And then we're also including POSIX client shared, POSIX client SRC, and that's it. And then we have our output here where we are outputting it to the API folder. And again, you can output it to wherever you want. I'm just outputting it to there for this example. And I'm outputting the exe, which is based off of the title of the source code. So it's basically just going to be test_64, right? Yeah, test_64.exe. And that's going to be the name of our program. The last thing here is it's telling it that it needs to be dynamically linked to this DLL right here. So in order for our exe to run, it needs to have that DLL in the same folder, okay? So that's all. So let's go ahead and open a command prompt. And we'll type in TWS because that's the name of our batch file. I don't know if it's going to run. And it tells me that task list, again, is not an operable thing. So I'm going to have to remove that and figure out why that's not working later. So that means if that one didn't work, then task kill might not work either. But let's see. TWS, okay, so it's compiling the program now. The program named test. And it's taken a few seconds here. It's probably at least 10 seconds now. Normally it wouldn't take this long. It might be because it's the first time we're building it. Okay, good. So it looks as though our program has run as well because I did tell it to run. And we'll just move that off to the side for now. And what we saw at the end of our batch file is that task kill is not recognized as an internal or external command. So I think it has to do with something with Windows 7 or something the way my system is set up. So that's really not a problem for now. So you can see that when I ran the file, it ran it in another command prompt. That's also a good thing when you're debugging stuff. So our program is running that we've just created called test_64. It's one of the examples. And the first thing it did was it told us the API version, and then it tried to connect to TWS, but then it said it could not connect to TWS. That's because TWS is not even running on my system right now. Okay, so it's saying not connected, so nothing is working here. It's just spitting out a not connected message. That's part of the way the program is written, okay? So what I'll do is I'll close this for now. And what you need to understand about this type of program is that it's a very extremely lightweight program. And from my experience so far coding with this library, no matter what I do with it, I can pull out streaming options data, I can pull out scanners, I can pull out live order data or whatever it is you want to pull out. It's always been extremely lightweight. Now there's a couple things you might have to adjust, and I might show you how to do that. So I'll close the program for now. What I'm going to do is open up TWS to see what happens. So let's go ahead and fire up Trader Workstation. Okay, so I now have TWS open here on my laptop. I am in the paper trading account. This is where you should do all your testing if you're developing programs here. So I'm going to go up to File to start Global Configuration, and then go to the API Settings. So I'm going to click on API and then Settings. There's a couple of things here. I disabled the read-only API because when you start accessing some of the EReader methods that are used for retrieving order data, this one kind of messes up, so I turn it off. And then this has to be on, of course, enable ActiveX and socket clients. And then the socket port, this is where you change it to the socket port that you're going to be using in your program. In the example code that we just built, it uses this one right here, but you can just type in any number here. It just has to match it in your code. Then there's a couple extra settings, but most of them don't need to be changed right now. So all should be generally fine. So I'll apply that and click OK. And the next thing I will do is simply run that program. So let's go over to the API folder, and I'm going to run that test_64 application. And let's see what happens. Okay, there we go. So we are now getting live market data come in. And what this program does is it has sort of like a debugging thing where it's like it disconnects and then it sleeps the program for a few seconds, then it connects it again. It says it's not connected, and then it connects again. That's what this test example does. And you can see that it's working. It's giving you market data. It's giving you some of those ticks for whatever symbol it's getting. At this point, I'm not sure exactly what symbol it's getting. I think it might be Microsoft. So I'll go ahead and look at the source code, and this is what the source code is doing. We have our EReader class here that's being defined at the top. And then these are the methods, the EReader methods. And I'm not going to go into it so much in this video, but when you make a call to one of the EClient methods, it's going to populate these EReader methods, and this is where you can grab the data out of. So in this case, it's grabbing data from tick price and tick size, and it's printing that here using printf, and that's exactly what we are seeing here getting printed out into the command prompt. All right, so I'll scroll down. You can see there's a whole bunch of those EReader methods. The actual program is down here where we have our int main function. You can see before that they've defined a struct that contains contract info, but you don't actually have to do it this way. You can go and get the contract data directly from the other header file. But in this case, they've done it manually. So then if we look through the program, what they're actually doing is they're making certain calls. The first call they do is they do EClient client version, just to get the version of it. Then they disconnect only for test purposes because we haven't even connected yet. So just calling disconnect before it's connected. And then they are calling EClient eConnect to make the connection, and then they're getting the server version. And then they call this method, which is rec market data. Now this is used for getting real-time data, and that's what you were seeing there at the end. Let's go on, and I want to show you this one now, which is retrieve history. What I did was I took the EReader methods from the top of this code, because some of them are necessary, not the tick price and tick size, but these ones like win error, connection closed, and a couple other ones related to getting messages. These ones right here, connection opened and messages, and check messages started and check messages stopped. These EReader methods need to be copy pasted into the retrieve history code into your EReader class. And you basically would just copy paste them here. And then you can use this retrieve history source code as a basis for how to get stuff done. Now, what I like about this is that in the main function, we have any contract declarations, but again, that can also be done outside the main function if you need to. And we have basically our call to our eConnect and any eClient methods, like in this case, they're using rec historical data. And then this is basically what lets the program continue running here, which is while the EReader is not done, it calls check messages in a loop. And it basically stays inside this while loop until you decide to close the program. That's all. And what you can do here is you can implement different things inside this block, inside this while loop, and just be careful what you implement here. You should definitely debug that first, but you can implement anything inside of this while loop that you want to be run, or conditions that you want to be checked for. You can also make reference to data that you're getting from your EReader methods up here. All right, so I'll show you an example of something I made now. Let's see what we can do. So I'll go into this and I will grab this TWS program 1. Now, if I do try and run this from here, it will not work. So I have to bring it into that API folder. So let's drag that in. And now we have this program here, TWS program 1. I'll just make sure nothing's running here. And I will run that. Okay, so we do have a connection that's been opened here, market data. Now, what this one is doing, actually I've turned off most of the methods, but what it's doing is it's looking for order data. So I'm gonna go ahead and go into TWS. I'm gonna prompt an order on one of these symbols on Apple, for example. I'll just prompt a buy order at a price lower like that, and I'll just transmit it. Okay, now I've transmitted an order. Let's look at my program, and you can see right away we have some data that's been populated here because my program is looking for order data. And that's pretty much it. Parent order, the order ID, the order status, and all that. If I cancel it, then it'll tell me the order was canceled. That's a simple program, but I've been able to get the options data to stream out of here, including all the options Greeks and everything. So these programs that you can make use barely any processing power. And one thing that I will not forget to mention is that the EReader here, what you can do is you can disable the EReader function that works inside of the EReader, and just put this as false right here instead of true. And it will not run the EReader calls because I don't think they're necessary. And I think that this also makes the program a lot more efficient when you turn off the EReader. All right, that's gonna cut it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you learned something. Check out this video. YouTube's gonna recommend it. And this is a playlist full of other Interactive Brokers tutorial videos. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Take care.